this module about Aurelia, we will look at configuration and routing. Routing is a required feature for most applications because routing allows us to break a large application into smaller independent pieces that are tied together through links and navigation menus. To use routing, we need to add some configuration to the application. So we'll start this module by seeing how to take control of application startup and add some explicit configuration code. Back in the beginning, in the introduction of this course, we saw how we need to place the Aurelia app attribute into the DOM. This lets Aurelia know how to get started and where to take control. And when we use Aurelia app without any value on that attribute, the bootstrapper will start the framework with some default configuration values and then go looking for a module called app. We build out this app module to retrieve and display movies. And I told you we could use framework features like dependency injection, because the DI container is available with the default configuration, and the DI container itself receives some default configuration. But if we want to take more control over the configuration of our application, for example, we want to tell Aurelia exactly what features of the framework to use, and perhaps configure the DI container to inject some component other than the real movie data when a view model asks for movie data, then we can tell Aurelia to start with a specific module that provides some configuration information. The way we do this is to give Aurelia app a value, and that value is going to be the name of the module that we want loaded that will provide the configuration information. In this case, I'm going to call that module main because it sort of represents the main entry point for a program. And that means I will need to add a JavaScript file that has the name main.js. And inside of main, what I want to do is export a function. I'm going to call it configure, because this is what Aurelia will look for and invoke once the framework is up and running and the bootstrapper is putting all the pieces together. When the framework invokes this configure function, it's going to pass in an object. We'll call it Aurelia because it represents the framework. And then there's a configuration API available. I'm not going to go extensively through the API. You can look it up in the documentation. But the gist is that I will walk up to the Aurelia object and tell it to use specific features. For example, I could tell Aurelia that I want to use the event aggregator, and I could tell Aurelia that I want to use the default binding language and default resources, and the router, which we're going to get into in just a little bit. I can also just tell Aurelia to use a standard configuration, and that will give me all the basics that I had before. And there's a Fluent API here, so I can chain methods together. I can also tell Aurelia to use development logging. And for now, this is all the configuration I want to provide. I just want to see the application running again. And in order to do that, now that I've exported an explicit configuration function, I need to explicitly tell Aurelia to start. And this start method can be asynchronous as Aurelia loads different resources. So it's going to return a promise. And then I can say on that promise, given a variable a that represents Aurelia, let's set the root to use to be the document object, which is implied, so I can actually leave this off. But I now have a place where I can put some explicit configuration code. Let me just save everything and refresh to make sure this still works. And it does, and of course in the UI, there's no apparent difference. We're still just displaying movie information. But now I have a place where I can start taking control of this application, including the ability to specify exactly what module that I want loaded. Do I still want to load the app module, or do I want to load something else initially? Well, I'm starting to think that I want some different features in this application. Yes, I want to display movies, but I also might want an area where the user can go to an about page. These are all things that I would want in the navigation menu. And now that I have a little more flexibility about how my application starts up, I'm going to restructure the project so we can scale out these features a little bit better.